it's an interesting class, and we're gonna stay on this issue of skin because I think I just think it's a very interesting topic. Can you go to the next slide, Leah? But first, I want to say a couple things about how this class is organized. Hey, right down here in the second row, there's a whole bunch of seats. You have to just come down. Don't worry about. I know that people come in late, and you're going to have to find seats. It's fine. It's good. That's part of it. Just come down right in here. There's a whole bunch of seats in the second row, third row. Hey, it's like you have to kind of learn how things go. So here's the thing. The way we organize the class is that there are the topics change every year, every semester, and we never do the same class twice, and that's just how we operate. And the reason for that is because we like to keep things contemporary, and it's more interesting that way. We can kind of follow the news. We can see, the news cycle with where things are at, what's happening. I can adjust the classes accordingly. And to be honest with you, I never fully know. A lot of times, I just kind of get the spark to talk about something, and it's much more interesting if I get the spark in the moment and say, okay, this would be a really good topic. Sometimes because of what's happening in the news, sometimes of what we just talked about. I mean, there are any number of reasons why that would happen. But we never, for the past 7 years, 8 years probably, I've never done the same class twice. So every semester and every year, every semester it's 30 new classes, 30 new topics, 30, whatever it is. And it's really, it's most interesting. Certainly for me, it's most interesting. So keep that in mind. Oftentimes, I'll know a week in advance, but sometimes it's really just a couple days ahead of time that we really put the class together. And sometimes we'll start out with, several classes on one topic. A couple years ago in one semester, we started out with the first 4 classes of the semester were all about issues related to Asia. And, a year before that, we just got hung up on it, talking about Hispanics and Latinos. And so it was just that. We just dug in that way. And today it's just skin. We're going to do skin today, and then we're going to do skin again on Thursday, but we're going to talk about international issues on Thursday. Today we're just talking about the U.S. So next thing to say is, remember, this is a class that's half U.S. issues and half international issues. Okay, so it really is a balance back and forth. And we really rely on volunteers. And so we have a lot of folks have already applied to volunteer. You have to, you gave us your consent, right, to volunteer, and that's important. And I want to, do look for the volunteer link again. I'll send it out again, but it's just social19.org/volunteers. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So speaking of volunteers, we have Nat. Can you introduce yourself, by the way?
I'm Nat.
Wait, hang on. Just push that up.
Hi, my name's Nathaniel. I go by Nat. I'm from Long Island, New York, and I'm studying public relations.
And say in your ancestry.
I'm Haitian. My parents immigrated here from Haiti.
Haitian. And when's the last time you were in Haiti?
I think I went when I was like 6. It was a long time ago.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll talk about Haiti. So this class has a long history with Haiti. We've had a lot of fundraisers in Haiti. We've sent helped a few Haitian students to go to high school and university. And you will meet them. You'll meet Ernso for sure. So, You speak Creole?
Oui.
Oui? Okay. So I would like to invite, so sometimes what happens in here is we don't know, or I don't know exactly who would be the best possible representative to be up in the front of the room, given the day's topic, okay? And today is one of those days. And the best possible representative would be somebody who would agree with this statement. And mind you, I agree with this statement. Sometimes it seems like we're just spending too much time and energy talking about race and race inequality. And sometimes, I have this sense that maybe it's just kind of, by talking about it a lot, sometimes it's as divisive as anything else. And it depends on the situation. But I would like to invite a couple of people to the front who feel like, yeah, I could agree with this statement. So if I were in class, I would raise my hand because I'd say like, yeah, I can come down and join Nat. So who would like? It's going to be a really interesting. It's going to be a great class. Should I tell you what I want you to, what you're doing? What you'll be doing if you come down to the front? Remember, okay. So look, when you see that in a class like this, the tendency is going to be to imagine that, oh, this is a trap, right? That what I'm going to do is try to find somebody who's like would take a bit more of a conservative position, and then we're going to kind of go after that position, because this would be identified as more as a quote conservative position, and we're going to unpack that a little bit about what that means. What we're going to do is we're going to return to the issue of skin. And today's class is built upon a conversation that I had last Friday. I went to see my dermatologist to do my annual skin checkup and to see, if I have any things that look suspicious and could be melanoma or some other problem. And then I engaged in a conversation with him about skin pigmentation, and training of dermatologists in the field of dermatology, and things that he said, things that I know, and things that I read. I said, hey, let's talk about this issue of dermatology, and let's talk about skin, and let's talk about how there are many people in the field of dermatology who are saying to themselves, we really need to think about revamping this field. There are a lot of things. We're falling short in many ways. And so there are many people in the field who are pushing to open some things up to have a different kind of conversation about skin, and in particular light skin and dark skin. And so I thought, hey, after I put everything together, all of my thinking about how I would present this to you, I thought, I think I have an incredibly reasonable way of approaching this, in a very reasonable way of talking about it with you. And I think it's about as reasonable as I could ever imagine having. Okay? Now, the problem is, that's me. And obviously, I'm pretty good, given, how many people enroll in this class semester after semester. It's voluntary, it's not required. And, those of you from so many different backgrounds and political perspectives and so on and so forth, obviously, I must do a pretty good job, a decent job, or good job, I don't know how you'd say it. You all can decide by the end of the class, at talking about things like this and presenting things like this. But I don't know. I'm 62 years old. I've been around the block a long time. Sometimes I can be a little bit out of touch. I don't know. And so what I thought is, if I could get first off, I thought one person, but it'd be really nice to get two people who could come sit here. And you might be one of these people, because I don't know what your way of thinking is. But if I could get two of you to come sit here and just help, just observe, listen to what I'm saying. I can go back to the three of you and say, okay, how is that? What did you hear? How am I being fair? Am I missing something, right? I'm talking about a part of this, a piece of this issue that we're going to talk about today, because, it's like, what's the title of today's class? Go back 2 slides. When should we see color? I'm going to make the argument that in the field of dermatology, we should see color. But I might fall short. And so what's really nice, because I want the truth. Like, I would like to move us forward. And sometimes moving us forward means talking about things, and really seriously talking about things. And sometimes moving us forward means actually being quiet. Stepping back, like, we don't need to talk about this. Maybe it's not a big issue, or maybe I missed something, right? So oftentimes I miss more of a, maybe I'll miss some issues that are, people will say, I'll maybe decide, you know what, that's not an important piece to talk about. That little piece right there that you might think is built on, emerges out of racism or emerges out of stereotyping. I really don't think it is. But you might say, no, but it is. And you're missing it, because this is why this is really important. Like you, Sam, you're downplaying racism. Or I might move an idea forward that I think this is really growing out of some grave problems. It's systemic problems that we're dealing with in society. And you might be one of these three people that say, I don't think so. I think you're missing it because of X, Y, or Z. Now, for you what you have to do, you have to have the trust that I'm absolutely serious in saying, I would really like to have two people here who, the best would be a couple of people who just like to argue. And like, the hand goes up at me, just like to argue. You just, you annoy your friends because you're always the contrarian, you're taking some other position. But in this case, you have to like to argue on the basis of maybe thinking we're going too far and we're talking about things that don't matter. Remember, I'm going to make the argument that the field of dermatology is falling short. And it's falling short in particular with regard to people with skin that is more darkly pigmented than people with skin like mine. And that matters to all of us. So you got to be able to say, like, oh yeah, I like to argue, and I could do that. I can do that. Like, if you need me to step forward, I can do it. So now, who would like to volunteer? Hang on. How about you had your? I'm going to go. You ready? All right. You come down, and bro, I'm going to go with him. All right. You're good. You can do it. All right. Come down. Yeah. Yo. Hey, first off, yeah, grab a seat. First off, can you put me on, can you put me on yellow? Yeah. No, put me on green. Just put me on green. Hey, I just want to point out that basically what I've asked for is for people to come down who are willing to, take this seat and really challenge. Make sure that we're being fair in here to multiple sides. This is big. Hey, there's a lot of people here, right? You feel that when you're down here? You're like, okay. And when they came down, people clapped. And why did you clap, by the way? Why did you clap? Did you clap, bro? Who clapped? Why'd you clap? Like, why did you, what was that for?
Well, like he just said, it's courageous.
It's courageous?
Yeah.
What, can you hold up,
Wait,
Mike?
yeah.
What makes it, can you put him on yellow, by the way? What makes it courageous?
I would say that just because there's like so many people looking at them and they're talking about an issue that's definitely not the easiest to deal with.
Yeah, yeah. Which is skin and race,
Yeah.
and potentially racism. Yeah, and what I'm asking them to do, in particular, you hear what I'm asking you to do. Now, you can go as far as you can go, right? What I'm asking you to do is try to take the challenging place that, A, maybe things aren't as bad as you think they are. Maybe this isn't that important. Maybe, because that's the only thing that moves us forward, is when we have these kinds of conversations. If we all come in here, if I come in here and I just talk at you, it's like, yeah, there's also, if I take this position, let me talk about the field of dermatology, and it's, there's racism all through the field, and here's why, and, well, you don't get challenged. Like, you don't get a chance to think on your own. And the only way you get challenged is if you do what I'm asking the three of you to do. Because again, I don't know your political ideology. You're Haitian. I mean, you could be really, really, really conservative. You could be way more conservative than anybody else. So I'm asking you to make that challenge, okay? So is that cool? Hey, okay, so right now we're going to take, can you go to the next slide? We are going to take attendance, and here's how we're going to roll. And in the meantime, while we take attendance, so Julie, hang on, Julie may not have opened the quiz yet, so just give it a second if it doesn't open. Hey, can you bring the camera in the back? I want to, while we're doing that, can you guys put yellow, is yellow on the screen? Yeah. I want to introduce you all to the stream team. So you guys do that, and I'm going to go back. So come in the back. Yo, man. Niche, can you introduce folks?
Hi,
You can go
people.
in the
You
back.
guys already know me. I'm Niche. I'm going to show you guys the team and what we do behind the back door so you don't come back here just curious after class.
Thanks.
Okay. Aria is on camera. We have our directors, Isabella. We have Nora back here controlling what you see on the bigger screen. We have Juyi controlling the robotic cameras on the sides of class. And then Caleb is in the middle on camera. And then you have Yunji up there on another camera. And Alessandra is also back here. She is our photographer, which you can turn and show Alessandra and not me.
So this is all.
You can turn and show Alessandra and not me.
So this is all student run, right? So it's great. We're in the third day, so there's a lot kind of happening, but it's very cool. It's a lot of fun. Okay, so you guys good? Everyone's good on the attendance?
All right.
Everyone get on?
Aria,
It's taking a while. Wi-Fi? Well, hang on. You'll get there. Okay, here we go.
we're good?
Dela. In the sweater vest. All right.
All right, come back up.
Love it.
I'm already sick of this.
Go ahead. All right, y'all. So you turn these on right there. Okay. Hey, Julie. So we're still working. Who has not taken the attendance? For whom has it not worked yet? Just a couple people? Okay, keep working it. And then make sure you put your laptops away when you're done and your phones away when we're done. Okay? Julie's going to keep it on for another few minutes. And if for some reason you're not able to hang on, listen up. This is really important. And then we're getting ready to start. Dude, nice job the other day, man. You guys. You good? Hey, if for some reason I'm going to introduce you to the attendance team next class. But if for some reason you're not, like something happens, you'll see them after class. Okay? So, Kylie, go ahead. If you could introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, lots of people. I'm Kylie, I'm a 4th year, and my major is rehabilitation and human services.
Rehab and Human Services. Awesome. And you are, what led you to say, okay, I want to come down? Are you like to argue? Is it?
Yeah, I kind of like to argue, and I don't know, I feel like within my major, we talk a lot about skin and stuff like
Okay.
that. So I feel like it would be good for me to be here, I guess.
Okay, yeah,
Stand
to
up
be
for that.
challenged in
Yeah.
some way.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yep.
Hi, my name's Ansh.
Ansh.
I'm a sophomore majoring in IST, and my ethnicity is Indian. I'm an international student.
And your hand went up when I said about arguing.
Yeah, because I feel sometimes we just go with the flow and accept what a lot of people are saying. And with issues like these and stuff that we've discussed in class yet, I think there are certain things that maybe you need to sit back and think on your own. And I have some ideas of my own, and sometimes they're not the same as everyone else, but I still stand by them. And I think everyone should have certain ideas that they should stand by.
Totally. Yeah, and know that those ideas will change. Yeah. Hey, so can I ask just the two of you really fast? When I was talking about, there's a sense because we're in the very beginning of the semester, so we're establishing this place of trust. And so, by the time we get a few weeks in, you'll have an understanding of how we operate in here and why that's important. But did when I was saying that, how much did you feel it on a scale of 1 to 10? How much do you trust that, okay, he's saying what he means what he says? Because you don't know me, right? So
I was going to say pretty average, a 7 or an 8 maybe.
okay. All right.
Yeah, solid 8.
Solid
Solid
8?
8, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to get you up. I want to get you to 10. All right? Maybe not today, but how about you? Where are you at?
Somewhere in the middle.
In the middle? 5?
Maybe, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wait, why is that? Why only a 5?
Well, I just started.
Oh, you just started. Dude, you know what? 5's good. Okay. 5 is good. All right. All right, let's go to okay. So here's the thing. Again, now I'm going to make my argument. So people with more darkly pigmented skin, they contract or die from melanoma at a rate of 1 per 100,000. People with lighter skin, this is just in the United States, is 30 to 100,000. Okay, so what we were talking about last class with melanin, and that melanin's a protector of skin, and even if you have dark skin, 1 in 100,000 is kind of serious. And sun damage isn't the only way that you get melanoma, by getting too much sun. But if you but clearly, so even if you have really darkly pigmented skin, so you're most protected, so you're in between because you're pretty light skinned, but you're more protected. The two of you you're more protected than her, just naturally with your skin, and you're more protected than him and her, right? But people with really light skin, 30 to 100,000. Okay, that's fine. That's just skin. That has nothing to do with any with human intervention. That's all about God or evolutionary process or whatever you want to say, right? So if that's an issue that people with light skin like me have to take up with the Creator to say, hey, man, what's going on here? But it's about the survival rate. And in medicine, it's so often about the survival rate. Once you have an operation, or once you contract some disease or something that you come up against, what's the likelihood that you're going to survive? And this includes being treated, so with different body types, but also whether you get treated or not. So in this case, there are a lot of things that go into people with darker skin having a lower survival rate than people with light skin. Okay, so many things go in. Here, let's go to the next. And so the survival rate is what we're talking about. So now we say, okay, What's the problem? Like when you're dark-skinned people have a lower survival rate than than light-skinned people. What do you take from that? What's the problem? What's the cause? Anyone want to take it?
I mean, like hate crimes. Like there's so much discrimination.
No, hang
against-
on. We're only talking about skin cancer.
Oh, that's it. Okay.
Skin cancer. So once you get skin cancer, anybody in here that once you get diagnosed with skin cancer, what's the likelihood that you're going to survive this thing? White people, 90% of us. Light people, like you and I, 90% of us are going to survive. The two of you, it's going to be lower. Okay.
I think it's also because of the fact that, and we've touched on this, that there isn't much research in this specific field as far as dark-skinned individuals are concerned, just because that standard baseline was established at this one point. So maybe any standard research or some paper that comes out is done by keeping in mind that your general population is going to be light-skinned, and that is why you may or may not have a lot of ways to treat people who have dark skin and have skin cancer, as we're talking about.
Okay, so where did you get that idea? Like, I'm gonna be your friend who you're at Zeno's, or you're somewhere, you're at the cafeteria, you're talking, and you make that statement, and I would say, wait, how do you know that? Like, what do you mean? What are you talking about?
My first instinct was of the fact that you said that we had this conversation last class that about that baseline, right? We talked about skin pigmentation, finding their vein, and all of that stuff. So then I think about, okay, maybe it's not just limited to dermatology. Maybe it's healthcare and the field of medical sciences in general.
Okay.
Just because of how we've come about to this point in society, and maybe there are so many other things that people are not looking at just because they've established that baseline.
Okay, Kylie. So you see that headline, 5-year survival rate. It's, considerably lower. Where's your brain go? Where's your mind go? What are your thoughts?
Like not in regards to like skin cancer, right?
Just skin cancer.
Like
yep.
what I previously said. Okay.
No, just skin cancer. The survival rate, once you're diagnosed with skin cancer, black people have a lower survival rate. Where do your thoughts go?
My first thought, like I already kind of said, was like hate crimes and a lot
No. We're going total just
we
skin
are
cancer.
I asked and you said no.
No. Oh, yeah, sorry about that. No. Yeah, that's me. I got confused. Yeah,
Okay.
no, so only skin cancer. Like you
Okay,
read that, like,
okay.
okay, survival rate. Yep.
Okay, so I get like same thing what he said is like what we talked about last class. You told us about the nurse that like they weren't taught like how to find a vein in a colored person, and just like a white person, she had to figure it out herself.
Yep.
So I think
Yep.
it's just like the lack of research and understanding of how to care for people with different skin colors.
How to think about those things.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Nat, do you have, where's your mind go on this?
I also think that, like in the past, they actually used to use like black people as experiments when it comes to medical experiments, because they thought that we had a lesser like pain tolerance. So I
Yeah.
feel like that did trickle down into today, and where a lot of like doctors and stuff don't believe us as much when we complain about certain health issues.
Oh, okay. All right. So I might go to you and say, hey, I'm having this problem with my skin. They look at it. I talked about like maybe there's a rash and they don't see the rash because they're not trained in how to see the rash. And they disregard it, and that rash becomes something that's much more dangerous and that kind of thing. Okay. All right. Okay, awesome. Yeah, awesome. Can you go to the next slide? So in this world of science is all about, whether it's social science or biology or chemistry or physics or anything, it's all about causality. We want to know causality, okay? So once diagnosed with a melanoma, dark-skinned people have a lower survival rate than light-skinned people, white people, okay? What's the cause? Like, what's the cause? We go right there. If you have a more of a racial activist bent, right, you're going to see the cause as somehow outside of black people themselves. And you're probably going to see the cause as much more like white people, like you know, as you implied, as all three of you implied, really. Like, and if you have a more of a different kind of perspective, like saying, well, I'm not really oriented toward thinking about the system, toward thinking about like racism and the ways in which people have systematically created these unequal relationships between groups of people, then I'm going to think, where am I going to look for the cause?
Science? But how could
No,
you...
I'm going to look at it. Okay, go ahead.
But how could you not consider the system?
How could you not consider the system?
'Cause
Well, I guess you wouldn't consider the system. How do you think you could not consider the system?
privilege.
Privilege? Meaning you have the privilege to not
Ignore those things, or they probably don't affect you as much,
Okay,
so you just don't think about it.
okay,
But it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist.
okay. Right. So, for example, with my dermatologist the other day, if I wasn't a person who was thinking about skin and race and bodies, I never would have asked him the question that I asked him, which was, hey, let's talk about the training. Let's talk about if I came in here and I had really darkly pigmented skin, what would you be looking for? And how do you know? Where did you learn what you'd be looking for? And then we had this long conversation about these things. If I didn't have that, I wouldn't have any idea. So you're saying that's a kind of a privilege. What do you think about what she just said about the privilege? Like,
I mean, I agree. Like, I'm not going to act like it isn't a thing, like white privilege and everything. But I also feel like it's not talked about a lot. Like, I think people would rather just ignore it and not see it and just like accept the privilege that they have rather than do something about it.
Okay, so white privilege is one of these buzzwords. Right? There are a lot of people, not just white people, but black and brown people also, that they're tired of talking about privilege, white privilege. It's like there are many people in this class, right, who don't feel, you're white, you don't feel privileged. And in many, obviously, we're going to talk about this. We're only at the very beginning of the semester. We're going to talk about class, and we're going to, all the ways in which many white people here, on the basis of many factors, are not privileged at all. Like, come on. And there are many black and brown people in here who are far more privileged than white people on the basis of many different variables, okay? But you raised it, and you said in this case, though, it feels like there's a certain white privilege, okay? Are you in agreement with that?
I sort of disagree with it.
Dude.
You're
doing your job. Okay.
I don't know. I don't want to say something that's gonna. Okay. So.
No, hang on. Your job is to.
Yeah.
You're not even necessarily putting your ideas out here. You're putting ideas out. So if it's your uncle or your neighbor or your friend who you think would be thinking this, put the idea out. Don't worry about it.
I think personally, from what I've seen, the idea of privilege, like as you said, this word is used a lot. I think in this case, or like in general, in most cases, what we see as being a person of color myself, and things I've seen around, most cases it's people who are underprivileged and who do not have certain things, certain needs. And because of that, they suffer. But that does not necessarily mean that the person who is not in that situation is privileged. So, we were talking about that standard baseline. So, for example, if something similar is happening for, let's say, a group of people, and let's say 3 of them do not get certain things or do not meet certain criteria or whatever, then that doesn't mean that the whole group, other than those three people, are privileged. What I would consider is that those 3 people are underprivileged and we need to uplift them, and that's where that equity thing is involved. That's what my fair idea goes into that picture.
Okay, all right, that's fair. I like that.
I said it was a privilege to not consider the system, though.
A privilege to not consider the
System,
system, which is a
that's-
really good point. Yep, it's a certain privilege, right? And by the way, when you hear people especially black and brown people talk, I'm going to say this, and you let me know if you agree, right? When I hear a lot of black and brown people talk about white privilege, what I'm actually hearing them say is that not just that all white people have privilege, it's that there is a certain, I mean, sometimes people say that, right? And sometimes, and sometimes I roll my eyes at that. I'm like, have you ever been to, the people that are going to clean this room, for example, tonight, like 12 midnight, 1 in the morning, and they're not getting paid a lot of money. I would be hard pressed to ask some of those of you who are black and brown to come in here and just wait in the room when they show up to clean, and then they clean the bathrooms and so on, and explain to them how it is that they have privilege. Like, compared to you, those of you who are driving, like really nice cars and I mean all sorts of things, right? Just explain to them how they have privilege, right? That would be actually a really nice challenge. Just engage them in conversation and see if you can convince them that they have privilege. Just as a thought. That is a thought experiment, right? And if you're one of these people that very quickly says, throws around white privilege and like, oh, white people have privilege, I said, well, I would challenge you to do that. So anyway, that's just a thought. Okay. Yeah.
I disagree with that. I think that
Wait, what do you disagree with?
the analogy that you gave, the thing that come at after the class or later and like talk to those people and see where that privilege plays out. I think if you're considering these two scenarios where we're comparing ourselves to them, we can't really talk about privilege there because it's more of a class thing than a race thing.
Okay.
So for example, if we consider two people who do not have education qualifications, who are both qualified to do minimum wage jobs like these that we talked about. And in that category, we talk about a person of color, or a person who's black, and a person who's white. Then we could talk about privilege. Okay, that white person got that job, then that person might have that privilege. But between us as students, it's not about more like privilege. We could be brown, black, white, but we come from money. They do not, and that's why they're doing that job. So they would not feel that privilege. So I think sometimes it also depends on like the context of the situation.
Okay, listen, 100% agree. I 100% agree with you. What I was referencing was what I hear sometimes, especially students who are much more on the liberal left, students, but older people as well. But I'm just engaging with young people who will throw around a term like white privilege, just as though it's like they're drinking water or something. White privilege, and that's white privilege, and this is white privilege, and that's white privilege. And they throw it around really recklessly and carelessly. And so those are the folks that I'm challenging to see it more nuanced in the way that you're doing. Okay? But let me go, so right here, causality. I'm going to break it into 3: patients, practitioners, and the system. Okay, let's break this down a little bit. Okay? So let's go to the next slide. Hey, by the way, I'm I'm going to introduce you next class. All right. This is Leia up here. Okay. So let me do this. You mentioned studies, black people. Okay. How much responsibility do patients have? Do black people, dark-skinned people have for this situation, for these lower survival rates? Okay. And let me just say this: when this is I normally, by the way, you need to know. Normally, what I'll do is I'll put where the study is that I get information. First off, you have to trust that I've been burned many times by putting up statistics that I couldn't stand behind. And what happens is, people watch the stream and they write in and they say, "Hey, tell me where you got those numbers?" And I'll send something to them, and they're doing the research and send back to me like, "Okay, I looked at that study. You can't really use that." And then I got to cross that off, and so I'm always very, very careful about what I put up. For whatever reason today, I forgot to put this up, but this is Here are these numbers. 80% on average, of white Americans have trust in their doctors, their primary care physicians, medical practitioners, okay? 43% of black Americans, okay, and have trust for a lot of reasons. And so I'm going to make an argument, and I want you to respond in particular. And I say, okay, look, this is where I'm going to try to be really fair, okay? But I need you in particular to push back and push back hard if you need to. But I'm going to push right now, okay? Look, and I'm going to talk to black people, okay? So you just got it? So black people, listen, man. I get the distrust, okay? I get the distrust. You know, Nat mentioned experiments. There's so many. The most common one that people talk about is the Tuskegee syphilis study, where between, I think it was 1933 and 1972, I was 12 years old in 72, they were injecting black patients with syphilis without their knowledge, just to experiment on them. I mean, this is like akin to what the Nazis did to Jews in the 1940s. Black people, you're just your bodies, and we're going to inject syphilis in you, and then we're going to watch and see what happens. It's like, that's probably as close to evil as you could ever. That's pretty evil, okay? If I can use that term. That's a hard term, but I'm going to use it, okay? Look, and there have been other studies and so on. But black people, look, things have changed since 1972. Things have really changed. And while you might have a conspiracy orientation that stuff is still going on, be very careful about those YouTube videos that you're watching and things that you're reading and things that your Uncle Delbert tells you about white people and the white system. Because maybe your Uncle Delbert has been watching too many bizarre YouTube videos from I don't know where. And so you have a responsibility to be smart about these things. So, you know, when black people under COVID, and so a much higher rate, black people at a much higher rate were saying, hey, we're not going to get this vaccine because, you know, what white people do in the system and Tuskegee and the syphilis study, and we don't trust vaccines. And I think, well, mind you, remember black people, I'm making an argument here. So Nat's gonna push back against it, right? Because this would be an argument that would be much more typical of somebody who would be saying, you have to take some responsibility for yourself. You cannot just sit back and blame the system for all of the problems. The system, racism, white people, it's like, no, that's fine. You can talk about the system, but you have to also take some responsibility for yourself. And what that means is you have a responsibility then to go out and try to understand what is actually going on in the world, and not just listening to your Uncle Delbert postulate all of his racist theories about white people and experimenting on black people. So under COVID, black people were so much more willing to question about, vaccines. And there are people in this building and next door in life sciences who've been studying, they've been studying vaccines, these mRNA vaccines and so on, their whole lives. We knew so much about these vaccines. And so I know some of you are probably anti-vax, and okay, great. How did you get to your anti-vax perspective? Did you talk to scientists who've been studying this their whole lives, and they really, really understand how this stuff works? They've been developing this vaccine for over a decade, and they didn't just come up with this. Or were you watching YouTube videos? And if you were watching YouTube videos, then I would say, well, in fairness to science, and in fairness to your own intellectual growth and development, you do have a responsibility to go read what some of the scientists are saying and then assess. And if you didn't do that, then okay, well, then you can't say that you know about vaccines. Because these are not people who are here out just trying to hurt you. These are very, very smart, thoughtful people. So, message back to black people. You can't just call in the syphilis study every time you want to turn around and question the healthcare system. You can't just do that. The study's over. Things have changed. We're not doing those experiments on people. Maybe we are. Maybe there's like, it's happening out in the desert outside of Las Vegas, right? Area 51? I don't know, where they keep Martians and stuff. But you also got to take some responsibility for not having trust in the medical establishment. Just because your grandmother doesn't trust and your father doesn't trust and you just believe them, that doesn't make it okay. Just because they said it. You know what I mean? So it's just like in this classroom, which is why the three of you are up here. Just because I say it doesn't make it okay. You have to think on your own. Okay, so what I'm going to say is on the trust issue, yeah, black people, come on. You got to it's not, take some responsibility, because the trust issue means that you're going to be less likely to go get a checkup. That means if you have skin cancer or a skin problem, it's already going to be far more advanced than when it finally shows up, because you were distrustful and you're like, I don't trust these people. It's like, who are these people? Who are you talking about, right? So anyway, go ahead, push back, Nat. First off,
I agree.
First off, hang on. I just want to ask you a question. How many white people, in my position, would stand in front of this room of people and make that and say what I just said?
Very bold white people.
Very bold ones. Yeah.
I agree that we are responsible for going to our own checkups and keeping all that in track. But at the same time, there is a reason for the distrust.
Okay.
So it doesn't come from nowhere.
Yep.
If white people or science or any of that was good to us from the beginning and we had no issues going to the doctors or anything like that, this distrust wouldn't even be a thing. So I feel like honestly, I feel like white people make a lot of the problems and then complain about the problems and act like it's coming out of nowhere.
And act like you're
you complain
responsible.
too much.
No, I got you. So
you made it a thing.
Yeah, exactly. By the way, white people, what she just said right there is really, really, really important. We create these things. So many things happen. The inequality. Black and brown people didn't create the inequality. Native Americans aren't the poorest ancestry group in the United States because of Native Americans. Native Americans are the poorest ancestry group in the United States because of the policies that were constructed by the U.S. government, mostly white people, almost entirely white people. Okay, and then to turn around and point fingers at Native Americans and say, you need to fix this problem. What's wrong with you? Well, hang on, we created it, but there's a point in time. So this is this thing. So the two of you ready? I want you to weigh in on this. There's this little bit of a tug of war. So if you talk to people and this includes black people, by the way, the most conservative place in the United States, and I mean conservative, man. Do you know where it is? Do anyone have any idea? It's a black church. You go to a black church, there's a singular message. It is not about the white man. Okay, there are a few, but the vast majority of black Christian churches, the singular message, it's powerful, it's resolute, and it's straightforward, is take care of yourself, stop complaining, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. If you did wrong, take responsibility for it and do better next time. And stop pointing fingers at other people. You're the problem. It's not the police. It's not the job that just fired you. It's not this. It's not that. Pull yourself up and move forward. Yeah, you experience racism and you experience this, but man, that black church message, and I feel like the message, there's almost like a way in which sometimes for white people it benefits us to not hear that. and not really understand that, because it almost like it allows us to be lazy in our own way unless we have really close black friends. And we realize that the vast majority are black friends. And like the vast majority, I don't know, maybe I'm out speaking, but how much conservative thinking exists in the black community, right? So the tug of war here is, I hear you, I understand, it does come from somewhere, but at some point in time, you gotta say, but I have to trust, I have to move forward. I still have to go check up on my skin. I may not trust, like I got this trust, it's been in me, like for you, right? It's like in your DNA. But imagine being my age and have 62 years of distrust, but still, you gotta, at some point in time, you gotta break through that. And so that's okay, go ahead.
It could also be a cultural thing too,
Yeah,
because like my parents believe more in, I mean, we use medicine too, but we also believe in like other forms of medicine, not just like ibuprofen and like what the doctor gives you, and that's probably like from their country in Haiti.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of other countries that like think like different herbs and teas and stuff like
Totally.
that are better for your health than like what the doctor gives you.
Totally. Yep. As the two previous classes, our Nigerian colleagues here, go and look in Nigeria, go to Haiti, man. Listen, I am, are you familiar with voodoo?
Voodoo,
Yeah. A little bit?
I guess, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I've been seeing some voodoo ceremony. Like, I was at a couple of times, I went to the cemetery in Port-au-Prince. So I've been to Haiti probably 10 times, I don't know, Went to the cemetery, man, in Port-au-Prince, where these voodoo priests are doing rituals and having ceremonies. And it's like, I went to the cemetery in Port-au-Prince.
Yeah, my family doesn't do that.
No, man. No, they don't do voodoo. I don't mean that. But voodoo there's so many, it's seen in a really negative way, but if you enter into it, it's black magic, but black magic is not black. It's like, it's also pretty cool. Okay, when I'm pushing back on this, saying that, okay, but you got to take some responsibility here a little bit, where does your mind go? What do you hear?
I mean, like, you were the one that showed us the statistic that, like, as a white individual, we have like a 90% survival rate, whereas someone who's colored only has a 66% survival rate. So how could you look at a medical professional and fully trust them if the numbers aren't the same?
Okay, but listen, because you're not thinking. But one of the big reasons why the rate is lower for people that look like me is because by the time I show up to see my doctor, this disease is already, advanced so far that it's a problem. So, like, okay, so therefore, I got to take I need to get on this. By the way, I'm saying this. This is a PSA to those of you who are more darkly pigmented, by the way, and have a distrust. So, yeah, that would be the reason. Okay, but now I'm going to go in a different direction because we can go. Let's go to the next one. The system. So, dermatology, of all of the fields of medicine, dermatology is the second whitest field, meaning that it's like 97% of all dermatologists are white. Hey, by the way, so we always take photos in class, and we always like to take. Alessandra always takes photos of everybody who volunteers. And then, did you get the photo from behind? Yeah, and then she'll take photos from behind, so like you can get that off of our website. So you just know if you volunteer. We always get some nice photos. She'll pick the best ones out and put them up, and you can grab them. It's kind of nice to have that. I think it would be. Is it nice? Would you like to have the photo?
Sure.
Do you? I mean, is it? I mean, you can say no, bro, but it's kind of like okay. So, but here's the thing. The study finds. Here's a study. It's the Kruger study. Finds discrepancies in biopsy decisions, diagnoses based on skin type. And basically what it is that, they gave random sample of dermatologists photos of melanomas for people with dark skin, brown skin, and white skin. And they said, hey, diagnose this. What is it? And which ones would you send up for biopsies? And what they found was that they did a really nice job for people with light skin. They picked out the ones that were in fact cancerous and said, yep, we need a biopsy. This one turns out, yep, they were right much of the time. That turned out to be cancerous. But for people with more darkly pigmented skin, it's like they missed it. They sent the wrong things to get biopsied. They were much more likely to send things up to get biopsied that were not cancerous. And the things that were cancerous, they missed them. So you missed. So meaning that even if you go to the dermatologist, so when you do go, so this is part of the survival rate. So it is that there's a distrust and you don't go in time. But there's also that when you do go, the dermatology field, the dermatologist is much more likely to be white. It's like they miss it. They're not skilled. They don't see your skin. They're just going to be less likely to find things on your skin than my skin. And the things they find, they're going to miss. They're going to send things up for biopsy that are not cancerous, and they're going to miss the ones that are. And part of this is training in textbooks. That for years and years and years, now I'm moving in, this is where the two of you now come into play more so. Now I'm moving into the system argument. This is what I walked away from the conversation with my dermatologist thinking. The field of dermatologists needs to change. So right now I just said to black and brown people, y'all need to change a little bit. Okay, you need to rethink some of this. But now I'm going to talk about the field of dermatology. Okay, so training in textbooks. I asked him, like, where'd you get, just similar to the phlebotomist, where'd you get trained to look at dark skin? He said, well, to be honest with you, in the textbooks, when I was going through dermatology school, I rarely saw photos of dark skin. He said, you know what? In fact, the place where people with dark skin, black people, are overrepresented in dermatology textbooks, in his experience, is with STDs, sexually transmitted diseases. Oh, so we want to show syphilis, or we want to show gonorrhea, or we want to show, here's a photo of a black person. So he said, if you want me to identify sexually transmitted diseases among a black or a brown person, he said, I'm really good at that because I saw lots and lots of photos. But I didn't see photos of other things. And I think, oh, okay, here's the system. Here's the system. This is the privilege that Nat was talking about, right? If white people are in charge, if you're not thinking that we have a problem, then you're not gonna think about it. You're not gonna move on it. You're not gonna do anything about it. You know? So it's like men in here. When you walk across campus at night, and you just walk across campus by yourself. You're meandering around, you're going to wherever you're going, you're not looking around to make sure you're safe, you're nothing. But I walk across campus at night, and I see some woman by herself, and 9 times out of 10, this is what I see. Or on speakerphone or somewhere. Why? She may not even be talking to somebody, but she looks like she's talking to somebody because she's thinking about everything that's going around. And in my male privilege, so-called male privilege, I don't have to think about that. So if I don't have a woman in my life, if I didn't have students, women students telling me, oh yeah, this is how we roll across campus, man, with my phone. I'm always talking to somebody in case something happens, like I want to already be on the phone with somebody. So like, okay, makes sense, right? That's male privilege. In a way. I mean, I don't see it. Why would I see it? I'm not responsible for seeing that. Why would I think about that? If I didn't observe it and then go like, why do I see? Why is every woman on a phone? But I'm not inherently responsible for that, for knowing that, because I can't be responsible for knowing everything. Okay? So we can't blame folks. But in this case, at some point in time, white people, this white system, training all these dermatologists, you got to say, what about all these black and brown people? Why weren't you thinking about race? And you say, well, because, this is this is me, because we didn't think about race in the same way in the 70s and 80s. You know, it's like really the past 20 years or so that we're really putting this out in a new way, okay? So here, let me show you some photos. Go to the next. So this is COVID toe. And look at, that's actually somebody from Southeast Asia on the left. But if you saw that as a dermatologist and didn't know, COVID toe on the right with a white person is really red. So that means, you know, somebody who has COVID and it kind of shows up with this on your toes in some really odd way. Well, that's easy, but if you didn't ever see it on the left, you wouldn't say, oh, that's COVID toe. If you were only used to the pink, right to the one. So, okay. It's kind of, next one. Here's this is a rash, a bullseye rash from Lyme disease. Well, look at the rash on the left. You have to know what that rash is. Like you know, you have to look for that. You have to, that's got to be in a text. You got to have to talk about that so you know, hey, when a darker skinned person gets Lyme disease, the rash is not going to be a bullseye. But always, what do we hear? Again and again and again. Do you hear about Lyme disease?
Yeah.
What do you look for the bullseye, right?
Yeah.
Do you see a bullseye on the left?
No, but there is discoloration.
There's discoloration, but it's not a bullseye.
But it's
in the
still
same way.
something that should be looked at and
Should be
should
looked
be
at.
tested.
But would the first thing, if you were a dermatologist, would the first thing you thought, if you didn't know anything about that, would you think, oh, Lyme disease?
No, but I'm also not a doctor, so.
Yeah, I got you. But if you didn't do the research and know, like, yeah, you might just move on.
I think that's the issue, is that there's a lack of research
Okay,
for
exactly.
people of color
Yep.
and like knowing how to treat them and knowing what to look for. So instead of just looking for like, how do I identify Lyme disease within a white individual, you would have to look at how do I identify Lyme disease for a colored individual.
Exactly, for someone of color. Yep. Go to the next one. Here's melanoma. So, you know, if you have darker skin, you're much more likely to get a melanoma. It's called an ALM. And you're going to get it on the bottoms of your feet or under your fingernails, somewhere that's not obvious. So it doesn't necessarily come from the sun. You're much more likely to. So it's like, oh, you got to know that. You got to look at those things. You got to look underneath people's fingernails. You know, you know, I'd want to say, hey, let me look at your fingernails. I wouldn't say that to you, right? But if I know that, then I do. And so here's where the field of dermatology is catching up with this new conversation. And so when you hear, can we go to the very first, don't go to the slide, but the slide is like, when should we see color? It sounds to me like we should start seeing color right now in the field of dermatology. Right? Go to the next one. So practitioners. So I asked my dermatologist, I said, hey, so like what are things like that you really have to do with people? He said, well, one, for example, I have to, you know, he was looking through my hair and he's looking for skin cancer on my head because a couple times in particular when I was a kid, I got sunburn really bad on my head. So I'm always saying, hey, check my scalp. So he's got his hands, you know, going through my scalp very carefully, right? And I said, well, do you do that with black people? And he said, well, I do. I try to because I understand how important it is. But you go to the dermatologist and the person says, hey, I got to like sort through those extensions, man. And I got to like really dig around in your hair. And, you know, maybe there are a lot of dermatologists who are not comfortable with that. And they're going to, and all they hear are the stories about, man, black people in their hair, black women in their hair. It's like, and they're just not going to do that. And I'm like, hey, but he's saying, nah, but I bust through that because I know I have to because people get skin cancer on the top of their heads. Like, okay, that's this person's willingness to say, I'm going all in. Like I'm gonna do this. But a lot of people wouldn't. And they wouldn't have the experience. Maybe you're in a community where there aren't a lot of black and brown people. So like, dude, it'd be tough to go through your hair, man. You like definitely got a lot of hair there. And for me, it's pretty easy. You could look at like you can just see like you don't even have to go through
I
it.
have to get a haircut.
Yeah, but no, it's not. But it's thick, man. So, but it's also would be a willingness to learn, and so this is going to be my final kind of thing that I want to say here, and then and then I want to ask you a couple. I want each of you to summarize. Hey. It seems to me, I would say, that I've made a pretty good argument for the profession of dermatology, all the way at the top, the way training is done in medical schools, the textbooks, the research, the way dermatologists are trained to interact with patients. From top to bottom, it seems to me that it's very important that this whole field of dermatology catches up, because it's been unfair to people with black and brown skin. And so for me, if I go back, can you go to the very first slide, Leah? If I go back to the question of today, when should we see color? Whereas sometimes, like people will say, oh, we're talking about color too much. I feel like this is one area where we should see color. And so when I hear people say, hey, it's about race or it's about color, we need to talk about this. This is one area where I think it's fair. Final thoughts, and then we're going to do the final quiz.
I mean, I totally agree with you. Where like dermatology is something that you should look for, like you should look at color, because you need to recognize that that's something where if you look at a white individual versus a colored individual, you're going to have to treat them differently. You can't assume everyone's the same in that sense.
Yeah.
So for those of you who are like in the medical field right now, I would say like advocate for those who are colored and ask your professors.
And by colored, you mean like all in all backgrounds, like all
anyone.
shades, all backgrounds.
Anyone.
When we say like, so when I say, to be clear, if I say black people, I'm really talking people of sub-Saharan African ancestry. If I say brown people, I'm talking about kind of everybody else who's not white, and sometimes including mixed people, and white people. Okay,
We
so
don't
you're
say
saying
when I say colored, like anyone
anymore.
who's not like my skin tone.
Yeah,
so,
got
like,
you.
darker.
Okay,
So
yep.
I would
Okay.
say like advocate for those people and push your professors to teach more about that, so that way when you're in the profession in the future, you can help individuals who are colored and give them the same experience.
Colored is
of
the
color.
wrong term.
Yeah, say of color. Yeah,
Of
say
color,
of
sorry.
color. Yeah. I mean, you can say color. You know who's bringing color
We don't
back?
say colored anymore.
No, but you know who does? People, people of East Asia. They're
There's
bringing that back.
People of color. But
Yeah.
when you say colored people, that's old
Yeah.
term.
Well, it's old term, but again, I want to say, I hear it sometimes in this class. I hear it a lot because I hear it from East Asians who I feel like are single-handedly really bringing that back.
Yeah, because like I've never heard that this was a thing. Like, I never knew. Like this is something new for me, and I'd like to know more about it. But like like people of color or colored people has always been like the synonymous
Something
thing.
about colored people doesn't feel right.
Yeah. Well, do you know why it doesn't feel right? For you.
'Cause it's an old term. It's like saying blacks. You just say black people
Yeah,
instead of
Black-
colored people.
So it's like a term. It is I mean, I'm asking you why, right? So for me, it's a term that we kind of got to. Then we got to people of color, and then we. I
Well,
don't know where we
people of
got.
color
we
is
don't use
like
that.
a bunch of like different minorities.
But we're not
I
really
don't
using
really.
that much
I feel like
anymore.
it's like black people and then people of color.
Yeah.
It's not just all one segment.
This is the thing, and like BIPOC, and we'll talk about this. We'll talk about the language thing. Yeah, I feel like colored people's gonna come
I
back.
hate that.
No.
Dude, I know, I hear
don't
you,
like
but
that.
I feel like Asians are gonna bring it back, right?
No,
'Cause-
I agree with you, and
Yeah.
I didn't mean to offend you, so I'm
Don't
sorry.
bring
but,
it back.
yeah.
But yeah,
Don't bring it back. Listen, yeah, people of color. So you said I didn't mean to offend.
No, I didn't mean to offend you, but no, you're okay.
No, no,
I
it's
want to
fine.
know because like in my major, like we don't always say black
It's
people.
just,
Like
like,
we will just say like
darker
people of color.
Yeah, colored is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You're good.
Hey, listen, we're gonna. Oh wait, hang on. Can you get Julie? The quiz should be ready. Dude, we'll come back to this. Dude, fine. And do you have a final statement? How did I do, by the way? Did I make a persuasive argument?
Yeah, I think it was nice. Just getting to know different perspectives.
Yeah.
I never knew that this was a thing, so just I learned a lot of new things. But also the fact that we looked at it from every perspective. So as a patient, my responsibility is to trust my doctor and whoever. And sure, there have been things like the syphilis thing you talked about. There have been things in the past, but for you to move forward as society, you have to take that step. But at the same time, the doctors also need to study. Like there's so much that everyone needs to.
Awesome. Dude, awesome. Hey, wait, hang on. We have 1 minute. Make sure the quiz should be open. You guys can take it. Julie, just leave it open. But I want to ask you one question. Where was I at the trust issue, like 7 or 8? Am I still there? Did I get to 9? 8 or 9? Bro.
Yeah, nine and a half. I'll give you 9 and a
Dude,
half.
how about you? I was at 5. Did you give me a 6? Don't tell me I went down.
No, I think you're like a 5.
Still a 5? I didn't go above 5?
I mean,
Oh
you
my
just
God.
brought up the points, but
Okay. Hey, listen. Hey, can we have a round of applause for folks?